Christmas is one of the most widely celebrated holidays, but the festive season is full of myths and misconceptions developed throughout history. From beloved traditions to biblical events, here are some of the lies you probably believed about Christmas. Christmas trees aren't traditional. One of the most popular Christmas traditions is decorating the tree with tinsel, baubles, and lights. But once upon a time, the concept was totally unheard of. Although evergreen trees had been celebrated in pagan winter festivals for thousands of years, the Christmas tree didn't appear in the US and UK until the 18th century. Various accounts of the first festive trees refer to 16th century Germany, including one story about a man named Martin Luther who bought a tree indoors after seeing the stars shining through its branches, reminding him of Jesus. The German tradition of decorating fir trees began with edible things like gingerbread and gold-covered apples, followed by small glass ornaments and colored paper. When German immigrants arrived in America in the mid-18th century, the custom was initially frowned upon, and President Roosevelt even denounced the practice as a waste of timber. The first Christmas tree arrived in Britain in the 1830s and became incredibly popular after Queen Victoria and Prince Albert posed in front of one at Windsor Castle in 1848. From there, the practice of decorating using candles, lights, and confectionery was accepted as tradition in both countries. And the rest is history. Your tree won't explode. Every year, the media is flooded with horror stories about real and artificial trees going up in flames, causing paranoia about an ever-growing fire hazard. The reality is that your tree is not at risk of spontaneous combustion, and according to the National Fire Association, or NFPA, between 2005 and 2009, fire departments attended an average of just 240 tree-related fires. Considering there are 125 million households in America and 25 million real trees sold annually, this number is considerably smaller than you might think. In fact, decorating the tree atop a ladder is far more dangerous, as emergency rooms treat around 5,800 fall-related injuries each festive season. Of the fires recorded, the majority occurred after Christmas when dried-out trees should have already been disposed of. So watering real trees daily is recommended. Saying Xmas isn't sacrilege. Steadfast Christian protesters have often declared that using the term Xmas attempts to take the Christ out of Christmas. But these fears of anti-religious propaganda are considerably exaggerated. In fact, the word Christ in Greek is written as Christos, beginning with the letter known as Chi, which, coincidentally, is also written in Roman numerals as X. In the 4th century, after the Roman Emperor Constantine elevated Christianity into a state religion, he even began using X as a symbol to refer to Jesus Christ himself. This is likely because parchment was expensive and word shortening was a cost-effective method for writing important scriptures. The word Xmas dates back to the 12th century, where its origins as a logical abbreviation certainly had nothing to do with slandering Jesus Christ, but rather efforts to maintain his name. 3 kings didn't visit Jesus on his birthday. On Christmas cards and in your grandma's miniature nativity display, the baby Jesus is usually surrounded by Mary and Joseph, some shepherds, a whole host of farmyard animals, and 3 kings bearing gifts. But what if this scene isn't entirely accurate? Tradition states that 3 eastern kings named Gaspar, Melchior, and Balthazar followed a star to Bethlehem, where they presented Jesus with gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But such men weren't really there at all. In the Bible, these men are simply referred to as magi, which translates to something closer to wise men or magicians, and their names, origins, and ethnicities are unknown. Their accepted names only appeared in a 6th century mosaic in Ravenna, Italy, and because the Bible speaks of 3 gifts, it was just assumed there were 3 visitors too. The Gospel even mentions that these magi visited Jesus as a young child at home with his mother, not as a baby in the manger. Scholars now believe that the men probably visited Jesus sometime between 40 days after his birth, when he was presented at the temple, to 2 years after, when King Herod ordered all infants under 2 to be killed. But better late than never, right? Jingle Bells isn't a Christmas song. The familiar melody of Jingle Bells might seem like a definitive festive tune, but the song wasn't intended for Christmas at all. An American man named James Pierpont composed the ditty, originally titled One Horse Open Sleigh, as a Thanksgiving song which celebrated general winter festivities. But the truths don't stop there. Pierpont was notoriously a bit of a jerk, and a deeper look into the song's lyrics revealed that some of the forgotten verses seemingly referred to high-speed sleigh drag racing and drunkenly picking up girls. When Pierpont's first wife died, he abandoned his kids and moved to Savannah, where he married the mayor's daughter and became the church's music director. Pierpont performed a particularly rousing rendition of Jingle Bells at the next Thanksgiving service, and the song went down so well that it was used again at Christmas. So a new tradition was born. Jesus wasn't born in a stable. Considering Christmas is a celebration of Jesus' birthday, the actual events surrounding the night of his birth have been generally wrongly represented. The story goes that Mary and Joseph spent the night in a barn after being turned away from the inn, but closer examination suggests that they didn't sleep under a starry sky after all. The Greek word kataluma, which was translated to mean inn, has actually been used to refer to a well-furnished guest room like the one where Jesus ate the Last Supper with his disciples. As Joseph had relatives in Bethlehem where the pair traveled to take the Roman census, it's likely they were expecting to stay in a family guest house. Although a manger or animal feeding trough is mentioned, it wasn't uncommon for families to bring their animals indoors at night to protect them from theft, where they would be kept in downstairs quarters. The likelihood is that the guest house Mary and Joseph were expecting was indeed full, so they were forced to sleep on the lower floor where the animals were kept instead. It wasn't luxury, but it wasn't exactly a hay-filled stable either. Boxing Day's charitable beginnings. December 26th, known as Boxing Day, is a second celebration which takes place in a few countries including the UK, Canada, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand. Nowadays, it's commonly associated with frenzied annual sales and certain sporting events, but its origins are far humbler. Perhaps the biggest misconception is that the name refers to the practice of boxing up unwanted gifts to return to stores. But this is a custom developed over time as consumerism at Christmas time increased. In the UK during the Middle Ages, December 26th was the only day churches opened their donation boxes or alms to dole out money to the poor. Servants were also given this time off to celebrate with family having worked during Christmas Day, and in Britain it is still a national holiday. Some lucky servants would also be given a festive box as a reward for their work, while the household would be left to eat box lunches, giving the day its name. Santa's hallucinogenic reindeer. For most, it's clear that Santa has never actually taken to the sky in a sleigh pulled by flying reindeer. But the origins of this fantastical concept might surprise you. Many scholars attribute the earliest appearance of Rudolph and his seven companions to Clement Moore's 1823 festive poem, "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." But Professor John Rush from Sierra College has made a far more intriguing proposal. According to his research, an ancient shamanic tradition of gathering, drying, and distributing the Amanita muscaria mushroom in Siberia, otherwise known as magic mushrooms, might have something to do with the notion of flying Arctic animals. These mushrooms would be given by shamans as gifts during the winter solstice, and tribespeople who consumed them would tell stories of flying native reindeer arriving with their gifts. Shamans dropped gifts down the chimney as snow blocked the doors, perhaps explaining Santa's unconventional method of entry on Christmas Eve. The red mushroom with white speckles has also been tenuously linked to the traditional colors of Santa's suit, as well as Rudolph's bulbous red nose. Scientists at Edinburgh University have even theorized that as male reindeer shed their antlers after the autumn mating season, Santa's reindeer are probably all female. German pickle ornaments. You may have noticed bizarre pickle-shaped ornaments appearing in shops around Christmas time, but this is not just a novelty, or at least it once seemed. The story goes that a tradition existed in Germany which involved parents hiding 2 glass pickles inside their tree on Christmas Eve. The first child to find one the following morning would get an extra gift from St. Nick, while the first adult to find one, not including the hider, would have good luck all year. As fun as this sounds, the pickle hiding tradition is almost completely made up, with just 7% of Germans claiming to have ever heard of the game. Although fruit and nut-shaped glass ornaments were made in Germany from the 19th century, gifts in Germany were typically given on the eve of St. Nicholas Day on December 5th. And to this day, most German kids still receive their presents on Christmas Eve. Most pickle ornaments are sold with fabricated stories of the age-old custom. so perhaps the whole thing began as a marketing ploy by some American retailer trying to shift a load of leftover glass pickles. Jesus wasn't born on December 25th. It might come as a shock, but the date of Jesus' birth, the reason we celebrate Christmas, has never been truly decided. Even more shocking is that it almost certainly wasn't on December 25th, based on new scholarly analysis of the biblical timeline. The only real clue about the time of Jesus' birth comes from the Gospel of Luke, which states that the shepherds were watching their flock at night. This suggests that the birth wasn't in winter at all, because shepherds would only generally watch their flocks in springtime during the lambing season. As late as the 3rd century, Christians didn't even celebrate the birth of Christ, and the first mention of December 25th comes from a 4th century edition of a Roman almanac or annual calendar which references the event. Some have argued that the date was decided to replace the pagan winter solstice while maintaining the celebrations, but Christianity didn't really acknowledge pagan tradition until the 7th century. As Christians developed the belief that Jesus was conceived and crucified on the same date, March 25th, they tentatively set his birthday exactly 9 months later on December 25th. Santa's popular image. Nowadays, Santa Claus is instantly recognizable as a jolly fat man with rosy cheeks, a fluffy white beard, and a signature red and white suit. But it wasn't always that way. The earliest manifestation of Santa was the real-life 4th century bishop and patron saint of children, St. Nicholas, who was charitable and gave gifts to poor children. When St. Nick died in 343 AD, December 6th became known as St. Nicholas Day. But by the 16th century, Europeans had distanced themselves from the story. Wanting to maintain the festivities surrounding St. Nicholas Day, a man named Father Christmas, Kris Kringle in the US, was invented instead. By the 1800s, this image had developed from a beardless thin man to a bulky, pipe-smoking man with a brimmed hat and baggy breeches to a happy drunk fat man with brown hair and jolly features. In 1881, American Civil War cartoonist Thomas Nast created the Santa Claus we all recognize today. And in 1933, Coca-Cola commissioned artist Haddon Sundblom to illustrate Santa for their adverts during the Great Depression. This popular Coke-guzzling image led many to believe Coca-Cola invented the Santa Claus image, but adaptations of Nast's Santa can even be found in White Rock soda adverts as early as 1950. The real Saint Nick. Although various depictions of the real Saint Nicholas exist in religious artwork, it's hard to imagine the man behind the Santa Claus we know and love. The remains of the 4th century Greek bishop are kept in Italy, and when his crypt was repaired in 1953, the Vatican commissioned thousands of detailed measurements and X-ray scans of his skull. In 2004, expert facial anthropologist Caroline Wilkinson used these to create a 3D reconstruction of St. Nick using advanced software. And it's a far cry from jolly old Santa. In 2014, Wilkinson updated her forensic reconstruction to get a more accurate image of the ancient saint, and the result is a man around 60 years old with a square jaw, olive skin, broad forehead, and long wiry beard. Surprisingly, his nasal bones were also broken between the eyes, giving him a wrongly corrected nose and beaten up look, which is in keeping with contemporary accounts of his fiery temper. So it turns out Santa Claus was a bit of a fighter. Which of these Christmas myths surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments, and as always, thanks for watching.